I ate breakfast alone by choice, not circumstance. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint. I made it that way. 3 spoonfuls of grounds boiled black in the tin pot. No one to tell me it was too bitter. No one to add milk without asking. Just me and the steam rising in the cool dawn light filtering through the kitchen window of my ranch house. I'd built this silence myself. Rebuilt it, really, from the wreckage of what came before. 5 years since Thomas died. 5 years since I'd stood at his grave and felt relief flood through me so fierce I'd had to bite my tongue bloody to keep from smiling. The preacher had called him a good man. The neighbors had murmured about what a tragedy it was, leaving me alone with a failing ranch. No one mentioned how Thomas had spoken over me in every conversation, made every decision about my horses, the ones I'd brought to the marriage, without consulting me once. "Diana doesn't understand business," he'd say, patting my hand like I was a child. "Best leave these matters to me." I'd watched him run my breeding program into the ground with his assumptions and his arrogance, watched my mares sold off to cover his gambling debts, watched myself disappear a little more each day until I wasn't sure who I'd been before I became Mrs. Thomas Brennan. Then he'd gotten drunk, fallen off his horse, broken his neck, and I'd gotten myself back. I spread the ledger open on the scarred pine table, running my finger down the neat columns of numbers. Black ink, all of it. 12 mares now, 4 with foals at their sides, 2 more due before summer. I'd rebuilt the bloodlines carefully, chosen each stallion for temperament and conformation. The Brennan Ranch had a reputation now, my reputation. Horses trained gentle but strong, reliable as sunrise. The coffee scalded my throat. I welcomed it. Outside, the first light turned the Mimbres Mountains pink. My land spread out before me. 30 acres of good grazing. Another 20 of rough country where the horses could learn to navigate stone and scrub. I'd mended every fence myself, replaced the rotted beams in the barn, negotiated every sale without a man's name attached to give me credibility. I didn't need credibility. I had results. The chair across from me sat empty. It had sat empty for 5 years. Sometimes, in town, I'd see the looks. Pity from the women, speculation from the men. Poor Diana Brennan, all alone out there. Wasn't natural for a woman. Surely she'd want a husband again. Someone to take care of things. I'd learned to smile and say nothing. Let them think what they wanted. I knew the truth. I'd chosen this quiet. I'd earned it. Every morning alone at this table was a victory. But spring was coming. I could smell it in the air. See it in the green haze spreading across the valley. Spring meant roundup. Meant sorting stock and breaking yearlings and checking fence lines I couldn't reach alone. Spring meant I needed help. Seasonal help. Professional. Someone who'd do the work and leave. I drained the coffee, bitter grounds and all, and rose to greet the day. My day. My ranch. My life. Built exactly how I wanted it. The silence tasted like freedom. I told myself that every morning. Matthew Cameron arrived on an April morning with dust on his boots and a bedroll tied behind his saddle. I watched him ride up from the barn, my hand already tight on the pitchfork I'd been using to muck stalls. Ready. I'd hired seasonal help before. Most men took one look at a woman giving orders and got that particular expression, amusement mixed with condescension. They'd nod along to my instructions, then do it their own way the moment I turned my back. Then they'd act surprised when I called them on it. "Mrs. Brennan?" Matthew swung down from his horse, a tall bay gelding with good legs. At least he had sense about horse flesh. "I'm here about the seasonal work." "I know. I'd posted the notice in Silver City 2 weeks ago." "You worked ranch before?" "Yes, ma'am. 5 years at the Double R up in Colorado. 2 seasons at the Bar T outside Santa Fe." Ma'am. Not little lady, not miss. I filed that away, still wary. "I run a breeding operation," I said, watching his face. Training focus is gentle handling, not bronc busting. I don't break horses. I teach them. You have a problem with that method? This was where they usually started, where they'd tell me about how horses needed a firm hand, how I was too soft, how back wherever they came from, they did things the right way. Matthew looked at the mares grazing in the near pasture, at the yearlings in the training pen. What kind of timeline do you use for saddle training? I blinked. What? For the yearlings, how long before you put a saddle on them? 6 weeks of groundwork first, I said slowly. Desensitization, leading, standing tied. Then saddle introduction. Another 2 weeks of... Makes sense, he said. Build trust before you ask for more. I waited for the but. It didn't come. The gelding in the far pen, I said, testing. The paint. He's got bad ground manners. Tries to bite. I need him gentled enough to sell. Think you can handle it? I can try, Matthew said. What approach do you want me to use? What approach did I want? Not what he thought was best. Not what any real horseman would do. What I wanted. Patience, I said, hearing the edge in my voice. Consistency. No hitting. No roping him down. He's scared, not mean. Fear makes animals... I stopped. Makes them lash out. Makes them fight even when fighting hurts them worse. Fear makes them dangerous, I finished. Yes, ma'am. He worked the paint that afternoon while I watched from the fence, my arms crossed, waiting for him to lose patience. The gelding danced and struck, ears pinned. Matthew stood quiet, not advancing, not retreating, just present. When the horse settled, Matthew rewarded him by stepping back. Pressure and release. Exactly what I would have done. A week passed. Matthew asked questions. How did I want the south pasture rotation handled? Should he turn out the mares before or after feeding? Was I saving the stud colt, or should he be gelded? He asked. He didn't assume. I didn't trust it. Couldn't afford to. Men could pretend respect for a while before the mask slipped. They always did. But Matthew worked from dawn until dusk, ate his meals alone in the bunkhouse, and never once suggested I didn't know my own business. The paint gelding started following him around the pen, the hardness leaving his eyes. Late Friday, Matthew approached where I was checking hooves on my best broodmare. Mrs. Brennan, I wanted to mention, that mare's near fore is warm. Might want to watch for abscess. I'd already noticed. Had the poultice ready in the barn. Thank you, I said stiffly. He nodded and walked away. I realized I'd been holding my breath, waiting for him to tell me what to do about it, to take over, to assume I hadn't noticed, hadn't planned, hadn't already handled it. He just told me what he'd observed and trusted me to know my own horses. When did that happen? When did a man trust a woman's expertise without testing it first? I watched him walk back to the bunkhouse, the evening light catching the dust his boots kicked up, and thought, maybe he's just good at hiding it. They always were, at first. The first season ended in October, when the aspen turned gold on the mountain slopes, and the nights grew cold enough to freeze water in the buckets. Matthew found me in the barn doing evening feed. Mrs. Brennan, I wanted to thank you for the work. I'll head out tomorrow if that suits you. Professional, clean, no hints about staying on, no suggestions that I might need help through winter, no assumptions that I couldn't manage alone. Tomorrow's fine, I said. You did good work. Appreciated the opportunity, he touched his hat brim and left. That simply, that easily. I told myself it was relief I felt, watching him ride out the next morning, his bedroll tied neat behind his saddle. Relief that I'd have my ranch to myself again. No one to navigate around, no one to manage. Just me and the horses and the silence I'd built so carefully. Winter settled in. I worked alone, like I preferred. Fed the stock, mended tack. Read breeding journals by lamplight. The coffee stayed black and bitter. The chair across from me stayed empty. The ranch felt quieter than it should. I caught myself sometimes, listening for a second set of boots on the porch, turning to mention something about a horse before remembering no one was there, making enough stew for two out of habit, then staring at the excess cooling in the pot. Just habit, nothing more. When spring returned and Matthew rode back up to my gate in April, I felt something loosen in my chest that I immediately tightened back down. "Mrs. Brennan," he said, "still need help for spring roundup? Still offering?" My voice came out rougher than intended. "If you'll have me." I hired him. Told myself it was practical. He knew the operation, knew my methods, wouldn't need training. Simple efficiency. The second season unfolded like the first, except I noticed things I'd missed before. The way he listened when I explained why I'd chosen particular breeding matches. The genuine interest in his questions about bloodlines and confirmation. How he'd mention a problem, fence section down, water trough leaking, but never implied I'd been negligent in missing it. Just brought it to my attention and waited for instructions. One morning I found the fence gate I'd been meaning to repair already fixed. New leather hinges, planed smooth, swinging easy. Matthew was in the far pasture, didn't mention it, just did it. Thomas used to fix things, too. Then hold them over me. "See what you do without me?" Place would fall apart. Matthew fixed the gate and said nothing. Like it was just something that needed doing, not proof of my inadequacy. I stood there running my hand over the smooth wood, something tight and painful working in my chest. This is professional respect, I told myself firmly. Nothing more. Don't mistake competence for something else. Don't be foolish again. When October came and he prepared to leave again, I found myself watching him pack with something that felt uncomfortably like dread. "See you in the spring, Mrs. Brennan," he said. "Spring," I echoed. This time I noticed the absence immediately. The barn felt too big. The evening meals tasted like dust. I lay awake at night listening to the wind and hating myself for missing the sound of someone else breathing in the bunkhouse. It was just loneliness, practical loneliness. Anyone would feel it, working alone for months. It didn't mean anything. I made the coffee stronger, worked harder, counted the days until spring without admitting I was counting. When Matthew rode up that 3rd April morning, 1886 now, I'd survived another winter. I let myself smile. Just for a moment. Just because it was practical to have good help returning. "Mrs. Brennan." "Matthew." We didn't mention that I'd been watching the road for 3 days, that I'd already prepared the bunkhouse with fresh bedding and supplies. We just got back to work, but this time, I caught myself watching him, really watching. The way his hands gentled a nervous mare, the way he stepped back when I approached, giving me space without making it obvious. The ease in his posture around me. Like he wasn't performing masculinity, just existing. It felt dangerous, this noticing. Like standing too close to a cliff edge. I'd survive by keeping everyone at arm's length, by making myself impenetrable. But sometime in the last 3 seasons, Matthew had slipped past my defenses without me realizing. Not by pushing, by waiting. By being exactly what he appeared to be, respectful, competent, patient. And that scared me worse than anything. I started noticing the small things. How Matthew asked my opinion instead of stating his own first. "What's your thought on the sorrel mare's training?" Not, "I think we should," or "the right way to do this," just genuine curiosity about my expertise. How he'd pause his work when I talked, giving me his full attention, eyes on mine. Thomas had never looked at me when I spoke. He'd stare past me, already forming his response, waiting for me to stop making noise so he could explain the right answer. Matthew listened like my words mattered. I'd catch myself seeking him out, making excuses to check whatever pasture he was working, asking questions I already knew the answers to just to hear his voice. Then I'd retreat to the house, disgusted with myself, remembering how I'd sworn never to need anyone's presence again. Late May, I had a difficult business decision. A buyer in El Paso wanted 6 horses, good money, but wanted them delivered in 3 weeks. I'd need to hire extra help for training. push the yearlings faster than I liked, risk their development for profit. I meant to decide alone. That's how I made decisions now. Alone. In my kitchen. No one to override me. Instead, I found myself describing the situation to Matthew over fence repairs. What do you think? The words escaped before I could stop them. He straightened, considering. Money's good, but those yearlings, they're coming along nice with the slow method. Rush them. You might save 3 weeks and lose 3 months fixing problems. Exactly what I'd been thinking. But hearing him say it, validate my instinct without trying to claim it as his own wisdom, felt like cool water after drought. Plus, he added, you've built a reputation on quality. One rush sale won't undo that, but it might start a crack. So I should refuse? I'm not saying that, Mrs. Brennan. He met my eyes, his own clear and honest. I'm saying you already know the right answer. You just wanted to hear it said aloud. My throat tightened. He'd given me back my own expertise, let me claim the decision while offering support. When had anyone done that? I turned down the El Paso buyer, took a smaller sale locally, slept better for it. But that moment stuck in my mind, sharp and bright. I trust his judgment. When did that happen? Trust was dangerous. Trust gave them power over you. Thomas had taught me that in 100 small ways, dismissing my concerns, overruling my choices, acting like his respect was something I had to earn daily and could lose with a single misstep. Matthew's respect felt different, steady, given freely and never withdrawn, even when I was short-tempered or wrong or stubborn. I didn't know what to do with that. So I started creating distance, assigned him work far from the main house, ate my meals alone again, stopped lingering by the corrals where he worked. Told myself it was efficient use of labor. Nothing personal. One evening, I looked out my kitchen window and saw lamplight in the bunkhouse. Imagined him there, alone. Maybe reading or mending tack. Wondered what it would be like to share supper, to talk about the day's work over coffee, to not eat in this careful silence I'd built around myself. The longing hit so fierce I had to grip the table edge. No, I won't need anyone. I can't. Need led to dependence. Dependence led to control. I'd survived by needing nothing from anyone. But late that night, lying awake, Matthew's words circled back. You already know the right answer. You just wanted to hear it said aloud. What if I was lying to myself? What if this isolation wasn't strength? What if it was just fear wearing strength's clothing? I lay in the dark, listening to the wind, and didn't have an answer. It happened at dusk on a June evening when the heat had finally broken and the air smelled like creosote and possibility. We'd spent the day inoculating stock, hard work that left us both exhausted and satisfied. I was putting away supplies in the barn when Matthew appeared in the doorway, backlit by dying sunlight. Mrs. Brennan, could I speak with you a moment? Something in his voice made my stomach drop. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. He stepped inside, took off his hat, turned it in his hands, nervous. Matthew was never nervous. I need to say something, and I'd appreciate you hearing me out before you respond. Every muscle in my body tensed. I knew what was coming, had known it was coming, maybe for months. Had been simultaneously dreading and wanting it in equal measure. I've worked for you near 3 seasons now, Matthew said quietly, and in that time, I've come to respect you more than any person I've known. Your skill with horses, your business sense, the way you rebuilt this ranch from nothing, it's remarkable. Matthew, please, he held up a hand. Let me finish, because I might not have the courage again. I fell silent, heart hammering. I'd like to know, he said, if there's room for more than professional respect between us. He took a breath. I'm not asking to control you. I'm asking to build something with you, as partners. The word hit me like cold water. Partners. Not husband and wife, not his woman. Partners. I stepped back physically, arms crossing over my chest, defense mechanism slamming into place. I won't be controlled again. I'm not. I won't surrender what I've built, I said, voice rising. I won't let someone else make my decisions, speak over me, treat me like I'm not capable. I won't disappear into someone else's shadow. I did that once, Matthew. I'd rather die alone than do it again. The words came out harsh, edged with old pain. Matthew's face tightened, but he didn't argue. Didn't get defensive or angry, just looked at me with something that might have been sadness. I'm not asking you to surrender anything, he said softly. I'm not your late husband, Diana. I've spent 3 seasons proving that, and if you can't see the difference between respect and control by now, then I don't know what else I can do. Diana, not Mrs. Brennan. My name in his mouth felt like intimacy I hadn't authorized. But I understand, Matthew continued. I understand the fear. I understand protecting yourself, and I won't push. He put his hat back on, gave me one last long look. If you change your mind, you know where to find me. If you don't, well, I'll finish out the season and we'll part professional. He walked away. I stood in the barn as darkness fell, trembling, furious, terrified. Furious at him for asking, terrified of myself for wanting to say yes. Partners. The word kept echoing. Thomas had said he respected me, too, in the beginning. Before the marriage, before the vows, when he was courting me, he'd praised my horsemanship, called me clever. Then the moment the ring went on my finger, it all changed. Suddenly I was too delicate for ranch work, too emotional for business decisions, too naive to understand how things really worked. The praise had been a lie, a trap. How did I know Matthews wasn't the same? That night I lay awake, replaying every interaction, looking for the cracks, the hints, the moments where his mask might have slipped, but all I found was 3 seasons of consistency, of asking instead of telling, of stepping back instead of forward, of supporting without controlling. I'm not your late husband. No, he wasn't. He'd proven that over and over, but trust was the thing I'd sworn never to give again. Trust gave them power. Trust made you vulnerable, and vulnerability, I'd learned, led to erasure. Dawn broke. I hadn't slept. The word partners felt different than marriage or wife. It felt like equals, like building together instead of one person absorbing the other. But was it? Could it be? I didn't know if I could risk finding out. The cost of being wrong was everything I'd rebuilt from ashes. So I did nothing, said nothing. Let the awful, awkward silence fill the space between us, where easy partnership had been, and hated myself for being too afraid to reach for what I might actually want. July brought drought and desperation in equal measure. James Garrison, who owned the largest ranch in the territory, started spreading rumors. Diana Brennan's operation was struggling. Her bloodlines were suspect. Horses looked good but had temperament problems. Better to buy from established ranchers who knew what they were doing. I heard it third hand from a buyer in Silver City. Tried to laugh it off, but then 2 sales fell through. Then Garrison started undercutting my prices by 20%. 20%! I couldn't match that and keep the operation solvent. I knew what this was. Garrison resented a woman rancher's success, simple as that. Couldn't stand that I'd built a reputation for quality that threatened his volume-based business, so he was trying to drive me out. Fine. I'd fought before. I'd fight again. I rode to every buyer within 50 miles, brought horses to demonstrate, let my work speak for itself, won some sales through sheer competence. But the rumors stuck. The doubt lingered, and Garrison's prices kept dropping. Late July. I sat at my kitchen table with the ledger open, running numbers I already knew wouldn't add up. The ink showed red for the first time in 3 years. Not catastrophic yet, but trending wrong. I could match Garrison's prices for 1 season, maybe. Eat into my savings, tighten my belt. Hope buyers remembered quality when the price war ended. Or I could ask for help. My hand tightened on the pen hard enough to snap it. Asking for help meant admitting I couldn't do it alone, meant acknowledging that independence, my hard-won, precious independence, wasn't enough to survive this. If I can't do it alone, what was the point of any of this? But the numbers didn't care about my pride. The ranch didn't care about my fear. Cold reality stared up from the page, adapt or fail. I hadn't spoken more than necessary words to Matthew since his confession. We worked around each other like dancers, professional and polite and careful. The ease was gone. My fault. I'd killed it with my fear. But I'd seen him watching Garrison's maneuvers, seen the tightness in his jaw when he heard the rumors in town. He cared about this ranch, about me. Probably, though I'd made it clear that caring wasn't welcome. He'd offered partnership. I'd refused. Now I needed what I'd refused. The irony tasted bitter as old coffee. I found him mending fence in the south pasture as the sun set, turning the sky the color of blood and gold. He looked up when I approached, his expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Brennan. Back to Mrs. Brennan. I'd earned that distance. I need to talk to you about Garrison, I said, voice rough. Matthew set down his tools, gave me his full attention. Waiting, not assuming, even now. He's trying to price me out, I continued, spreading rumors, undercutting by 20%. I can match his prices, short term, but it'll bleed me dry. I know, Matthew said quietly. I've been hearing the talk. You have a thought about how to handle it? He studied me for a long moment. I have an idea, if you're willing to hear it. This was it, the moment. Accept help or lose everything I'd built through pride. My throat felt tight. I'm listening. We match his prices temporarily, Matthew said. But we don't just match. We prove quality through demonstrations. I know ranchers throughout the territory. They'd come see your horses if I vouched for them. We show what Garrison can't, that your training produces better long-term results. Value, not just cheap price. We, not you should, not let me handle this. We. That would require me trusting you as equal partner in strategy, I said slowly, testing. Not just employee following orders. Yes, Matthew said simply. It would require partnership. There it was, the word I'd been running from. I need to think about it, I said. Take the time you need, Mrs. Brennan. His voice was gentle but firm. But the numbers won't wait forever, and neither will I. He picked up his tools and returned to his work, leaving me standing in the dying light, facing the choice I'd known was coming since June. Trust, or lose everything. Control, or connection. Independence so fierce it became isolation, or partnership that might multiply strength instead of dividing it. I walked back to the house as night fell, and the weight of the decision pressed down like the drought-heavy sky. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Lay in bed listening to the wind rattle the shutters. My mind circling the same ground over and over like a horse refusing a jump. Matthew's plan made sense. Perfect sense. Between my breeding expertise and his network, we could outmaneuver Garrison, prove quality over quantity, build something stronger than either of us could manage alone. But it required the one thing I'd sworn never to give, trust. Near midnight I gave up, wrapped myself in my shawl, and walked to the barn. Needed to move, to work, to do something besides lie there drowning in fear. The horses nickered softly as I passed their stalls. I'd raised most of them from foals, knew each one's personality, their quirks and preferences. This barn, this ranch, I'd built it with my own hands and wits and stubborn refusal to surrender. What if partnership meant losing this? What if Matthew's respect was just patience? Waiting until I needed him enough to accept control? In my mind, Thomas's voice. Diana doesn't understand business. Let me handle this. And then another memory, sharper. My father, before I married. Don't lose yourself, Diana. Keep something just yours. I'd lost it anyway. Let it be taken piece by piece until I couldn't remember what I'd wanted before I was taught to want what Thomas wanted instead. The barn door creaked. Matthew stepped inside, lamplight throwing his shadow long across the floor. Heard you moving around. Thought I should check. He saw my face. Diana, what's wrong? Don't call me that, I said, voice breaking. You don't have the right to. Then what do I have the right to? frustration finally showing in his voice. I've respected every boundary, asked instead of assumed, proved myself for 3 years, and it's still not enough. What more can I do? You can't do anything. I can't trust that this is real, because the moment I do, it'll change. That's how it works. They're respectful until you need them. Then suddenly you owe them something. Control, obedience, yourself. I'm not. My husband said he respected me too. I was shaking now, years of buried rage surfacing. Before we married, he praised my skill, called me capable. Then the moment I became his wife, I became his property. Every decision ran through him, every opinion got corrected. Every achievement became proof of his good management. I didn't just lose my voice, Matthew, I lost my mind. Started believing I really didn't know anything, really was too emotional, too weak, too. My voice cracked. Matthew stood very still. When he died, I said quietly, I got myself back, built this place from wreckage, proved I could survive alone. And that survival, that's everything. If I give it up, if I trust wrong again, I don't know if I could rebuild a second time. Matthew took off his hat, ran a hand through his hair. When he spoke, his voice was rough but steady.
I'm not asking you to give up anything. I'm asking you to build something together. There's a difference.
Is there?
Yes.
He met my eyes.
Partnership means 2 people making decisions together. Control means 1 person making decisions for both. I've never made a choice about this ranch without asking you first, never overruled you, never assumed I knew better, and I never would.
You can't promise that.
I can promise that if I ever did, you'd be within your rights to throw me off this land, and I'd go without argument.
He stepped closer, not crowding, just present.
I know you're scared. I know trusting again feels like jumping off a cliff. But Diana, you've been so busy protecting yourself from the wrong man that you can't see I'm not him.
The truth of it hit like a physical blow. I walked past him out of the barn, needing air, needing space. Walked until I found myself by the training corral where the paint gelding stood dozing. The horse Matthew had gentled through patience and respect. The horse that had been fear-violent when he arrived, now calm and trusting. Matthew had done that, not through control, through consistency. I thought of 3 years of small moments, questions asked, space given, decisions deferred. The fence gate fixed without fanfare. My strategy notes left untouched on my desk. His quiet departure each fall, no pressure, no demands. Every action saying, I respect your autonomy. Every choice proving, I see you as an equal. Matthew never tried to control me, not once. I'd been fighting a ghost, letting Thomas's voice drown out the evidence of 3 years of genuine partnership. What if independence isn't refusing help? What if it's choosing who you trust? Dawn was breaking, pale light spreading across the valley. I walked back to the barn where Matthew still stood, patient even now, waiting for me to make my choice. I want to try, I said, voice barely above a whisper. Your plan, our plan. But you need to understand, I'm choosing this, not surrendering, choosing. Something eased in his face, relief, hope. I know, that's the only way it works. If I ever make you feel controlled or dismissed or less than equal, you end it, Matthew said firmly. No questions, no arguments. That's the deal. I took a breath, let it out. Partners then. Partners. He didn't move to touch me, didn't assume the word meant more than it meant, just gave me a small smile and said, We should probably get started. We've got buyers to convince. And somehow, that restraint, that respect for my pace, my boundaries, my choice, made me trust him more than any grand gesture could have. We walked back to the house together as the sun rose, and for the first time in 5 years, the silence between me and another person felt peaceful instead of protective. We worked like we'd been partners for years instead of days. Matthew reached out to ranchers he knew, set up demonstrations, I prepared the horses, choosing ones that best showed the difference between my training methods and standard bronc busting. We matched Garrison's prices, but offered something he couldn't: proof of quality. The first demonstration was scheduled for a Tuesday in late August. Major buyer named Peterson ran a freight operation, needed reliable horses that wouldn't spook at noise or crowds. Exactly what my gentle training method produced. I was checking tack when Garrison himself rode into my yard. "Mrs. Brennan." He tipped his hat, false courtesy dripping from every word. "Heard you're giving demonstrations now. Cute idea." "Mr. Garrison," I kept my voice level. "What can I do for you?" "Just wanted to offer some friendly advice." He leaned forward in his saddle. "This territory's got room for established operations, not for women playing at business. You've had a nice run, but maybe it's time to sell out. I'd offer you a fair price." "I'm not selling." "Pride's an expensive luxury," Garrison said, "especially when you're bleeding money. How long can you sustain this price war? I've got reserves. You've got, what, desperation in a seasonal cowboy?" My hands tightened on the bridle I was holding. Before I could respond, Matthew emerged from the barn. "Morning, Garrison," he said pleasantly. "Here to see the demonstration? Peterson's due in an hour." Garrison's eyes narrowed. "I'm here to watch a woman embarrass herself trying to compete with real ranchers." "Then you're in for disappointment," Matthew said. His voice stayed calm, but I heard steel underneath. "Diana's horses are the finest in the territory. You know it. That's why you're trying to price her out instead of competing on quality." "Diana, is it?" Garrison smirked. "Familiar for hired help." "Partner," Matthew corrected. "And you might want to stick around. Learn something about actual horsemanship instead of volume sales." Garrison's face reddened, but before he could respond, Peterson arrived with 2 other buyers I didn't recognize. Word had spread. The next hour was the most important of my professional life. I showed 3 horses, a 4-year-old mare trained for saddle, a green-broke gelding, and the paint Matthew had gentled. Each demonstration highlighted what my methods produced: calm horses that responded to light cues, didn't shy at unexpected movements, stood quiet for mounting. Peterson watched carefully.
Impressive, Mrs. Brennan. But temperament's one thing. What about durability? These horses hold up to hard work?
"They do," I said. "Gentle training doesn't mean weak. It means willing. A horse that trusts you works harder than one that fears you."
Pretty theory.
Garrison called from where he was watching. "But theory doesn't survive reality. These horses look good now, but wait till they face real challenges." I felt my anger rising, the familiar urge to prove myself through argument. Then I caught Matthew's eyes. He gave me a small nod. "Trust the work. Let it speak." "Mr. Peterson," I said, "why don't you try the mare yourself? Put her through whatever paces you'd expect from a working horse." Peterson swung into the saddle. I stepped back, heart pounding. This was it. 3 years of careful training on display, my entire method being judged. The mare performed beautifully, responded to Peterson's cues, didn't fight the bit, handled sudden stops and turns without panic. When Peterson deliberately dropped his hat near her feet, she startled slightly but didn't bolt, looked to her rider for direction instead of defaulting to flight. "Well," Peterson said, dismounting, "that's something." One of the other buyers spoke up. "What about the paint? Heard he came in mean." Matthew caught my eye, asking permission. I nodded. "He came in scared," Matthew said. "Not mean. Mrs. Brennan's methods taught him trust instead of fear. Made all the difference." He worked with the paint, demonstrating the same calm responsiveness. Garrison watched with a face like a thundercloud. Peterson pulled me aside. "I'll take 6 horses, Mrs. Brennan, at your quoted price, which I notice matches Garrison's somehow." "For now," I admitted. "It's not sustainable long term." "Didn't figure it was," Peterson said. "But quality like this? I'll pay full price once you stop this price war. Your training's worth the premium." One of the other buyers agreed, then the third. By the time they rode out, I had orders for 15 horses total, more than I could have hoped. Garrison left without a word, his expression black as storm clouds. When the dust settled, Matthew and I stood alone in the yard. I was shaking. Adrenaline, relief, exhaustion, all mixed together. "We did it," I said. "You did it," Matthew corrected. "I just helped set the stage. The quality, that was all you." I turned to face him fully. 3 months ago, I would have insisted the credit was mine alone, bristled at sharing success. Now I saw the truth. The plan was his. The execution was mine. The success belonged to both of us. "No," I said. "We did it. Partners." Something shifted in Matthew's expression. Hope, maybe, or recognition. "Diana." "I was wrong," I interrupted. "In June, when you asked, I was wrong to refuse out of fear. Wrong to assume you'd become like him. You've proved yourself 100 times over. And I kept fighting ghosts." "You had reason to be afraid." "I did," I agreed. "But fear's not a good enough reason to refuse life. You asked to build something together. I'm saying yes. If the offer still stands." Matthew's smile started slow, then bloomed into something that made my chest ache. "It stands." "I'll need time," I warned. "I'll probably panic and pull back sometimes. I'll probably test you more than I should. Trust doesn't come easy for me." "I know," Matthew said gently. "We'll figure it out together. That's what partners do." Together. The word didn't scare me anymore. Late that evening, after the chores were done and the horses were fed, Matthew and I sat on my porch watching the sun set over the Mimbres Mountains. Not touching, not rushing, just existing in the same space without walls between us. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for being patient, for not giving up." "Thank you for being brave enough to try," Matthew replied. The drought finally broke that night. Rain came in sheets, soaking the parched earth, filling the dry creek beds, washing the dust from the air. I stood on the porch listening to it fall and thought, this is what partnership feels like. Not control, not surrender, just two people choosing to build something neither could build alone. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what I was choosing. We married in January, 6 months after the demonstration that saved my ranch. But before the wedding, we negotiated. Matthew and I sat at my kitchen table, our table now, though I was still learning to think that way, with papers spread between us, writing out the terms of our partnership in ink and witness signatures. "Separate accounts," I said, pen poised. "My ranch income stays mine, your earnings stay yours." "Agreed," Matthew said. "But joint account for household expenses and shared ranch costs. Joint decisions on major purchases or changes to operation. Both our names on the deed." I hesitated. The ranch was mine. I'd rebuilt it from ashes. Putting his name on the deed meant truly sharing, truly trusting. Matthew waited, didn't push. "Yes," I said finally, "both names." We wrote it all down. Individual pursuits protected, mutual respect required, decision-making shared equally. Either party could end the partnership if the terms were violated. A marriage contract that looked more like a business agreement. And that's what made it beautiful. We weren't making romantic promises we might not keep. We were building a structure that honored both our autonomy and our connection. The wedding itself was small. Judge Parker, a few neighbors, horses grazing in the background. I wore a simple dress, no white, no veil, no traditional trappings of a bride being given away. I wasn't being given, I was choosing. Matthew wore his best shirt, boots polished for the occasion. When Judge Parker asked if I took this man, I looked Matthew in the eyes and said, "I do, as an equal partner, not as property, with respect and autonomy and trust." That's not traditional wording, Mrs. Brennan, the judge said, amused. I'm not a traditional woman, Matthew grinned. I wouldn't want you to be. We wrote our own vows. Mine spoke of partnership that multiplies rather than divides, of freedom found in choosing connection, of trust earned through consistent respect. Matthew's promised to honor my independence, to build beside me rather than over me, to prove daily that love doesn't require surrender. When it was done, we signed the marriage certificate and the partnership contract both. Legal and personal. Entwined but distinct. Life after marriage looked different than I'd feared. I still ran the breeding operation. Still made the final calls on training methods, sales, breeding matches. But now I had someone to discuss decisions with. Someone whose perspective I'd learned to value. We planned together, worked together, built together. The ranch grew. Not because Matthew took over, but because two minds genuinely collaborating achieved more than one alone. We expanded to 40 horses, added a second barn, trained 3 young men in my methods who spread the approach across the territory. Garrison's prices crept back up. Mine stayed premium, justified by quality. Buyers knew the difference now. Evenings, Matthew and I would sit together reviewing the day. He'd ask about my breeding decisions. I'd ask about his training observations. The conversation flowed easy. No one dominating, no one diminished. Sometimes I'd catch myself watching him and feel that old fear surface. What if this changes? What if I wake up one day and he's become someone else? Then he'd meet my eyes and ask, "What do you think about the roan mare for the Patterson sale?" And the fear would ease. He was still asking, still deferring to my expertise, still being exactly who he'd always been. One night, nearly a year into our marriage, I said, "I was wrong about independence." Matthew looked up from the tack he was mending. "How so?" I thought it meant being alone, needing nothing from anyone, building walls high enough that no one could touch me. I set down the ledger I'd been reviewing. But real independence is choosing who you trust, choosing who you build with, having the strength to be vulnerable with someone who's earned it. You taught me something, too, Matthew said quietly, about patience, about earning trust instead of expecting it, about the difference between partnership and possession. I moved to sit beside him. We'd grown comfortable with proximity, not constant touching, but the easy closeness of two people who'd chosen each other and kept choosing, daily. My first marriage tried to erase me, I said. This one lets me be more myself. Because that's what love should do, Matthew replied. Not complete you or control you, just expand the possibilities. Expand the possibilities, yes, that's exactly what this was. I thought freedom meant empty space, walls, silence. I'd been wrong. Freedom was choosing to share the space with someone who respected its boundaries, who added to it rather than filling it, who enhanced rather than diminished. Spring came again. The cycle of seasons that had marked Matthew's arrivals and departures now just marked our work together, breaking yearlings, checking fence lines, welcoming foals, watching the ranch bloom into something more than I dreamed alone. One morning I stood in the barn doorway, coffee in hand, still black, still bitter. But now Matthew made it sometimes, and I made it sometimes, and the chair across from me was occupied by someone who'd earned his place there. The paint gelding, now fully trained, nuzzled my shoulder, the horse that had been broken with fear before Matthew gentled him with patience. Looking at him, I saw my own journey reflected, from defensive and isolated to trusting and whole. "You ready?" Matthew called from the corral, where he was saddling horses for the day's work. "Ready," I called back, and I was. Ready to work, to build, to trust, to love in a way that didn't diminish me. Ready to be part of a partnership that proved the right person doesn't limit your freedom. They multiply it. I'd spent years protecting myself from the wrong man by refusing all men. Matthew taught me that independence and partnership aren't opposites. They're complements. Freedom, I learned, isn't the space you keep empty. It's the space you choose to share. Matthew didn't complete me. I was already whole. We built something neither of us could build alone. And I'm still myself. Maybe more myself. That's the difference between control and partnership. One erases, the other creates. And I choose creation now. Every single day. I choose it.